Krim here with the second part of the concept art tutorial. This video is going to be focusing mostly around the fantasy knight, dark knight, blackguard, whatever you want to call him. There's going to be several different variant potentials with this because, well, it's a guy in armor, or a girl in armor, or whatever in armor, and armor is very versatile for concepts and designs. So right now we're going to be focusing on a closed set, and I'm just writing out some ideas for like stat allocations and such, depending on the armor piece. For example, lightning immunity. If armor is closed, it produces a Faraday cage. Now, almost every single fantasy setting, they do not include this, because, well, why would you have real-world physics in fantasy? So if you hit somebody with a bolt of lightning and they're completely in armor, no openings whatsoever, they should be immune to lightning. But that's beside the point. We're not going to focus too much on that with this. It's just designs. So what I'm doing is adding and removing certain elements with the monotone. It's more grays and such. And just kind of drawing into the silhouette to see what I can piece out from the darkness. And I can get several different feels for this. I mean, it can go pretty much any way right now. But I'm deciding to go more with the horns on the top. Now, if a sword hit one of those horns, it wouldn't help them too much. It's kind of like a Viking helmet. You hit one of those horns, it's just going to transfer the force straight to the skull. So I went ahead and carved the horns outwards to be more like they're a deflective piece. And you notice the large shoulder pads for this. That's more for the Dark Knight element. I was inspired by some Korean art from ages ago, back when I first started drawing, where it's part of the book that I was reading with the Korean art talked about how shoulder pads are a good indication for status for fantasy creatures, like a god or whatever, or somebody that's evil might have giant shoulder pads that are just massive with spikes and such. So I figured if this is going to be like a Dark Knight, then the larger the shoulder pads, the spikier, the better. So we're just going to refine a few parts to it so I can continue to make the skeleton for the actual design. And the cuirass for this, it stops at the navel, which is important because, well, you need to be able to bend. I'm going to make sure that this armor seems somewhat realistic. It's going to have a skirt on it too. And I'm not going to worry too much about the proportions in this, like if one arm looks larger than the other, if the breastplate doesn't seem quite right, because this is still early concept and I can still change stuff. So long as I don't actually start to color this and actually go into multiple layers, I can do whatever I want with this part. Like, notice here, the two armpit guards, I guess that's what you call them. I don't really know the name for those ones, unfortunately. They're not even. They're not the same thing, and to be honest, if this armor was done again, it could be anything, or it could just not have those parts at all. That's the thing with the armor. You can do pretty much whatever you want. Emblems and whatnot. So I'll probably have quite a few variants of this. And the reason why I'm doing the black and white on this with the brush, it helps add tone to the armor. That way I can get a feel for how the shadow will fall and how it bends and such. And I could actually take that and add a layer of color on top of it and have it to where it will sink into the layer below, so I can colorize the black and white to be whatever I want, depending on where it is. I'm probably not going to do that for this one because the proportions are wrong and I need to fix them. But for other versions, the variants and such, I likely will be doing that. So it's just something to keep in mind. It makes the coloring part of this so much easier than doing it by hands because, well, you already have pretty much the colors right there. And it just saves a bunch of time. Now notice the gauntlets. They're not exactly right either. I'm still trying to figure out if I want big spikes on them or what. So it really is just a process of adding and removing parts until I'm happy with what I see. And obviously the shin guards and such, the calves are way wrong. They need to be much longer, and the thigh needs to be much shorter, because technically speaking, the thigh is already underneath the skirt by quite a bit. So these thighs, oh, they're huge. They are so long for no reason whatsoever. And it's going to be something that I'm going to touch up later. Not in this video too much, but later when I'm actually trying to refine the proportions, that's going to be something that's going to be addressed. Just a few touch-ups here and there, though. Like I said, even though I'm not too concerned about the perspective and the proportions and such, I still want it to actually somewhat look right. That's the issue, the main issue with drawing with silhouettes and refining them. The silhouette is just a rough. If you're following it completely, it's not going to turn out too well. I mean, it's not like you're going in there with the overlay for how it's going to be with a human skeleton underneath it. Stuff's going to be wrong, and you just have to adjust accordingly. And this thing, we can actually add a cape if we wanted to. We can add a lot of stuff, a banner to them, larger shoulder pads, whatever you want. That's the thing with armor. It's amazing, isn't it? So now I'm going to go into the inking phase. And this isn't really required for this part of the concept art. I could continue to refine the silhouettes, but I kind of have a feeling for where the lines are going to fall. So I can just go ahead and skip to this part. Just big old fantasy horns and a weird visor and such. Yep. The thing with these horns, they don't really look like horns right now. They look more like they're vents or something as part of a gas mask or something like that. Until they actually have more texture applied and possibly the color on it, you can't tell that it's actually going to be horns. So that's something to keep in mind with drawing these. It's so open to interpretation, and one thing can just set someone off to see something else, and hey, that's fine. That's part of art. And that's probably going to be a variant, to be honest. Instead of having a traditional helmet, I can just give him like a witch doctor, not a witch doctor, yeah, a plague doctor mask, and just turn that into a helmet. That'd be interesting. Not too practical, but interesting. So these horns that are, sorry, these spikes that are on the shoulder pads, they serve a purpose to a degree. If a sword is coming in and hits them, they will be able to prevent the sword from going into a more fatal area. However, if they glance on the top of it, then it's just going to deflect the blade into the person. But if I turn the spikes the other way, then every time the person lifted their arm, they would be stabbing themselves. And that wouldn't be ideal at all. And I could add more joints and such of plate into this to where it was completely plate, but instead I want to give it a little bit of a chainmail feel to it. So I'm going to leave some areas intentionally open but still covered. That way I can just have the mail underneath. And ideally it would be completely covered with joints for the armor to actually be completely effective, but aesthetics. Why not? Why not do it to where it's slightly open here and there? It's still going to protect him from lightning, by the way. Just to drive that point home. But the thing with that is, if there were any openings in the armor, like if they had hair hanging out of the armor, then that whole lightning immunity thing would be null and void. It would still affect them. So long as they are completely covered, they're fine, though. Alright, so you see the elbow guard here? That was actually meant to go behind them, if I recall. But, whatever. I can touch that up later. I know about it. I need to fix it later. It's not too big of a deal. And I'm thinking about possibly changing the gauntlets to where they're more spiked like, and have it to where the finger joints have like nails on them or something like that. Just drawing each section of the actual skirt so I can get a better idea for how it's going to lay on itself. This is just so the knight can move around easier and bend. So it's not necessary, but it's more realistic to have. Now, the guard that I gave him, or her, whatever, at the start, around the elbows, not elbows, the armpits, I could also give those to him down here on the backs of the not the braziers, what are these? Well, the shin guards, I guess, but it would be the backs of it. I could give him those. Those are mostly for horseback, I believe, and preventing him from getting hit from behind. It's an option for a variant, but I'm not going to bother with them on this one. The way I see it, it's already a little muddied, and I don't want to make it even more muddied right now. So it's just going to be a leather and steel look. And with this, all that's pretty much left is a few adjustments for the proportions and maybe drawing some weapons for it. Now, there are several different weapons it could use. Could use a shield, could use a bunch of stuff. But we're just going to give it like a scimitar or whatever, cutlass sort of weapon, just to make it look more aesthetically pleasing for the actual knight thing. Maybe give it more spikes and a more demonic look. And make sure it has a guard and a pommel that can strike. Because, you know, why not? Now, this is going to be sketchy. I might refine these later. It's just loose weapons that he could be using. He, whatever, could be using. Not like they'd actually be using this. They could use a hammer for all, you know, it matters. Or a gun. Why not? Yeah. After this is all done, I will be adding the color to it, the tones and such, refining some placements to it, and we're going to go ahead and move on to the next heavy, which should be... Which one was it? Oh yeah, like the Juggernaut, the one with the really, really thick armor. That one's going to be fun. And this will be more like a high-class suit of armor versus that one, which would be more like a low-class suit of armor, and the third one, the Barbarian one, will likely just be bone armor, so it would be more like a forest sort of armor. So each of these sets are basically going to be classified like that.